Okay, no. So, holding Berachos on base Amud Aleph. I said base Amud base many times yesterday. I don't know why, but anyways, base Amud Aleph at the beginning, of course. I had a Rabbi, North Orlando. He once said a great line. He said that a genius is someone who thinks who thinks slowly, quickly. I like that line. I had a psychology professor who said that philosophy is thinking in slow motion. And I think, there's obviously both oversimplifications of what the reality is, but it's a point that we want to bring out, which is that Orlo's statement that a genius is someone who thinks slowly, quickly, is that it's the same kind of thinking. Good, if you're a genius, then you could do that same kind of thinking very quickly. But for the rest of us, I don't want geniuses here. If you're a genius, you'll have to find another place to go. But for the rest of us, we're doing the same kind of thinking, so to speak, that geniuses do, just we're doing it not as quick as they do, but it's the same methodical step by step, and that we should be, so to speak, philosophers of the Talmud, thinking in slow motion. That's what we want. We want to think rigorously and systematically. That's what we're headed here. So yesterday we had talked about the Mishna on the top of Beis Amud Aleph. We could break the Mishna up into three parts. The first part of the Mishna said, what is the starting point in the day for when we can say Kriya Shema of the evening, bedtime Kriya Shema? And that was the starting time is when the stars come out. 3 stars come out. The Mishnah is a strange lashon of when the Kohanim come in to eat their truma. We'll discuss that more. But that was part one, the starting time of Kriya Shema. And the truth is, it was a bit ambiguous. It was ambiguous whether Rabbi Eliezer was the one who said that, or if that was a standalone sentence. A standalone sentence made by a Tanakama and then an anonymous Tana, author of a Mishnah, which would be, let's presume, Rabbi Meir, perhaps, on its own. Then we had part two, we had 3 machlokas when the cutoff time is, when the Torah is mandated, when it says, Uveshach b'cha, and you are lying down to say Kriya Shema. We say it starts when the stars come out, 3 stars come out. The ending point is a machlokas. And I said the machlokas, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Gamliel had machlokas based on understanding the word Uveshach b'cha, the base prefix, in your lying down, if that implies when you go to lie down. That was Rabbi Eliezer's Shita, and he said that's the first third of the night. After that, it's too late. People are in bed already, so they've gone to bed. Or the Chacham had said, or Rabbi Gamliel had said, it's the whole night, and B'shach b'cha means in your lying down, means when you lie down, which is the whole night. You're supposed to be in bed. People are in bed in the nighttime hours, and therefore the whole night is a legitimate time to say Kriya Shema. The third part of the Mishnah was a Maisa. A Maisa is a story. I was mitcharet, I regret yesterday that I had used the expression once upon a time, because it sounds facetious, as if, God forbid, I was applying. I think once upon a time is for fairy tales, right? I didn't mean that, God forbid. I think what it's coming from, you're probably familiar with the expression like a baba Maisa, the same word, right? Baba, like a granny's Maisa, granny story, an old wives' tale. And there's Maisa here. It's like there was a story told about, but of course the story really happened, and it's here purposefully brought to substantiate and maybe further clarify the story of the Mishnah. So the story was that Rabbi Gamliel's boys had been out at a Mishnah, at a base Mishnah, at some kind of banquet. I told you it's a machlokas if it means a wedding, or if it means any old drinking episode at night, a bar, let's say. And they came back after midnight and asked, well, are we allowed to say Kriya Shema? Their question was that in the second part of the Mishnah, we said there were actually 3 shitas. There's Rabbi Eliezer, says you have the first third of the night, long past then. You have Rabbi Gamliel, he's the father in the story here. He said you have the whole night, but the Chachamim, the rabbis, give a middle time. And the middle time is the Chacham shita, presumably is the halacha, which was Yatul Chatzos, so midnight. It's not really clear if it's midnight, why, what does that reflect? It's either bedtime or in bedtime, so why the shita would be what it is not clear, but at the moment in the Mishnah. But either way, the boys were asking their father, well, since midnight has passed and the Chacham, Shir has left us, are we still able to say Shema b'yotzi b'di'evid? To which he answered, yes, you may, and you should. If it's not yet dawn time, you certainly can be yotzi, because the rabbis, the Chacham, really agree with me. that b'shach b'cha means the whole night long when people are in bed. It's just that, to kedil harchik as the other min averas, people doing the averas, they said, listen, you better say Kriya Shema by midnight, lest you overestimate how much time you have, and then you end up missing Shem Shema altogether. So, and the insight there is that the halacha is l'chachila, ideally like the rabbis wanted by chatzos, by midnight, but b'diavad you actually guilty till dawn. That's how, by the way, the halacha is brought down, the halacha, that a person has ideally should say Kriya Shema right away, at Seis, because it's the reason Makdimin, but really, if you don't do that, you're guilty till chatzos, l'chachila. B'diavad, if you did the Isser D'Rabban, you did Nevera, you didn't listen to rabbis, the rabbis proskin, this is the Shulchan Aruch proskin like this, you have till midnight. If you didn't do it till midnight, well, you're a bad boy not listening to rabbis, but the Torah's mandate of saying Kriya Shema b'shach b'cha still applies the whole night long, and therefore you could still say it and be guilty b'diavad. I mentioned to you that it wasn't clear if, well, I mentioned the machlokas over whether the Mishna was a stam party or whether it was a wedding. The nafka would be that if it was a wedding, it could be the only reason that he's being lenient with them is because they were close to the mitzvah. But had they been out partying, they would not have had the rabbinic A-OK to say it past midnight. In fact, I thought the rabbinic Yonashita, which is not the halacha, but the most extreme, is that the rabbis are actually mafkia. The rabbi said, listen, even though the Torah says you have the whole night, we say you have till midnight. And if you don't listen to us, after midnight, you're not guilty. We somehow have the power, says Rabbi Yonah, to strip you of your mitzvah. Even though the Torah says you could, we say you can't, and we sort of trump it. That's not the halacha. The halacha is taka, that's the whole night long, and really the Shulchan Aruch paskins that b'diavad, if a person was an anus, meaning he had circumstances beyond his control, he was sick, let's say, and he couldn't say Kriya Shema even until after the break of dawn, until Los HaShachar, still, before Netzachama, he can still say Kriya Shema of the B'shach B'cha, of the nighttime Kriya Shema, and B'yotzi, if he was an onus. Even though it's light outside, not yet Netz, you can be Yotzi b'diavad if you were an onus, because normal people are still in bed until sunrise. Not everybody, but many normal people, and therefore that's how it comes out Allah. That was our mission. So now we start with the Gemara.
You're saying it then, though, that cover you for the morning as well?
No, you can't dance on both weddings. You'll have to then say again Kriya Shema after Netzachama for your daytime Kriya Shema. Yep, you can't do both in the same window. Indeed, speaking out to your good question, the normal, proper, ideal time to say Kriya Shema of the Uvukumecha is actually before Netzachama. It's when it's like, so that you can actually finish the brachas and get into Shmona Esrei in time for the actual Netzachama moment. But you can't do that, indeed. If you are relying on this it's still b'shach b'cha bedtime, you certainly can't, in that same window between dawn and sunrise, also say the morning one. Yeah. Okay, fine. So now the Gemara commences. The Gemara's issue first is a structural issue. It says Tana Hechakoi, which means Tana Hechakoi, which if I can translate liberally, and I will take the liberty of translating liberally lots of times, at least initially, is something like, what you can't start a text like this. The Gemara is panicking. Imagine Moshe Rabbeinu goes up to Har Sinai, and Hashem says, Moshe, I've been waiting 14 billion years for this moment, the cosmos, finally we give him the Torah. Someone asked about the Berachos creation. The whole purpose of existence was to give the Torah, and now Moshe, the moment has come. So first things first. When 3 stars come out, don't forget to say Kriya Shema. So Moshe is scratching that and say, what are you talking about? First I hear about this, what are you doing? And that's the problem with the Gemara is wondering here, which is, how can you start a text with, don't forget to say Kriya Shema 3 stars out, because we haven't defined what Kriya Shema is, that there's such an obligation, and therefore it seems an illegitimate way to start. The exact words, Tana Echakoi, literally means, I guess, where is the Tana? Tana means all of the Mishna. Where's the Tana standing? In other words, what's his vantage point? Where does he get off? Almost that's Russia's words almost. Where does he get off saying from when we say Kriya Shema without first establishing the fact that there's an obligation to say Kriya Shema? And therefore, that's question number 1. The full Gemara should read Tana Hechakoi. Where does the Tana get off? Where's his position, his perspective, his standing point? The Katani Me'ema side. It opens with a And from when do we say it? Let's establish the fact first. V'su, and second of all, and this is already breaking the normal rules of Shach. The way the Talmud should normally structured is we play a game of ping pong, so to speak. There's a question, and then an answer. And then either you can accept or reject the answer, but it's one question at a time. Here, for some reason, the Gemara is making a two-pronged question, which is strange. The su means, and furthermore, the second question, Mishna, why did it, I can't show exactly here, Dikatani ba'arvis beresha, what changed, what happened, what did it see fit to teach Arvis about the nighttime Kriya Shema? First, that doesn't seem reasonable. Listening to Shachas Beresha, more reasonable, let's say for starters because of human psychology, if nothing else, is to start with the morning Kriya Shema. Like, why do we jump to nighttime? In normal human psychology, I will say, the day starts when you wake up, and the day ends when you go to bed. So it seems like sort of counterintuitive. Certainly if we're talking about social norms about bedtime and getting up time, so getting up time really comes first. Tosfos learns it much more technically. He just says, listen, we actually, the Torah itself, when it says about things like Karbanos, like the Korban, the Tamid, so it talks about the morning before the night, Tamid. So you see, like, mornings come before evening. Our Shulchan Aruch, the first thing it says, Yisgaver Kari, you have to straighten yourself in the morning, Lamod Babokir, to get up in the morning. The day starts in the morning, psychologically. So it seems a little strange, says the Gemara, that we're talking about nighttime first, going to bed. The book should start with getting up in the morning and conclude that way. So you have two questions. Number one, how can we jump to this assumption being Messiah? And second of all, why nighttime before daytime? So to that, the Gemara answers, and you'll have to think now, is this answering one question or both questions? And we'll have to ultimately recurse and say, and why in the world did the Gemara have to put these two questions together? Because they're totally independent questions. Question number one is, what's the orientation of the Mishna that starts with the presumption you can start with the main line, and a totally, really extensively unrelated question, which is why night before day? They're not why. But the Gemara answers, we'll come back to that. The Gemara answers, first of all, Tana Akrakoi. The Tana, the author of the Mishnah, he is standing, so to speak, his position, his orientation is based on the psukim, on the verse. Because the verse already said, B'shach b'cha uvukumecha. In your lying down and you're getting up. And it is totally reasonable for it to assume that you're familiar with that pasuk, and therefore, B'achi Ketani, and therefore the Mishnah is saying, Zman Kriya Shema, Shriva Emas. It's a given that there's a Kriya Shema of going down when you lie down in bed, because the pasuk said it already. You're expected to have known it. But Emas, when is that? When does it start? Misha Shekanam Nichnas Lechel B'Trumasan. It's restating in more words in the Mishnah that you know from the pasuk there's a bedtime Kriya Shema. You want to know when that is? When the Kohen come to eat their truma. So does that answer that the Tana is basing himself on the pasuk answer one or both questions? First question was, how can it start? From when? Question number two, why starting with the night? And the answer is, well, there's already a pasuk which says b'shach b'cha when you go to bed, v'hukumach when you get up. So this is answering both questions. Correct? Yes. First of all, it says it's saying something very fundamental here. It's saying that the Mishnah is assuming, it's understanding, it's demanding that you're familiar with the psukim already. All right, that's why the opening move of the Gemara here is telling you that the Mishnah is somehow built on understanding that there's a.
That's why you want to learn 1/3 Mishnah.
First third. So you're expected to know that there's psukim, and therefore the Tana is justified in assuming you know the psukim. But now we're coming to define the parameters of the psukim.
Plus, if you're basing your life on knowing the law, you can't learn it while you're sleeping. You have to learn it in the daytime.
Okay. Yeah. Good. But do me fair. Try to, if you don't mind, try to keep your, because there's so many of us, try to keep your comments yourself, unless I elicit them, I ask questions. But so this, once you say that the verse on which you're basing this is the verse when you lie down and when you get up, so that verse talks about lying down first, and therefore it's perfectly reasonable to talk about lying down first. Okay? So So, the Mishnah, first of all, is establishing this fact that we know that there's psukim and we're basing those psukim. This answer seems to say so much so that we're actually, our arm is twisted, so to speak, the Mishnah's arm is twisted to go against normal psychology of the day coming before the night and maybe other norms in the psukim of day coming before night and talk about night first because we're coming almost to explain that very pasuk. The Mishnah is almost like a parish on the pasuk. Right? The pasuk is there and I want to explain it and therefore we're pushed to say night before day. That's the first answer. V'ibo es ema, and if you want, I could say, that's literal translation word for word, meaning the Gemara now will give an alternative explanation. And here's the alternative answer. Yaleth mibriyaso shel olam. You can learn it from the creation of the world, the narration in Berachos, because the pasuk says, Vayi erev, vayi boker. I thought there was a night, whatever erev means, and there was a day, which is the first day, one day. But the point is that erev comes before boker, and night comes before day, and that's the Torah's approach to time, and therefore it's perfectly reasonable to start with night before day. So this second answer, is it going to address both questions or is it one question? The first question was, how can it talk about Kriyash Shema's time first? Just the second question, right? It doesn't address the first question at all. Which means, it must mean, that everyone is agreeing that the Mishnayos are based on an assumption there's a written text out there. That's a given. Everyone knows that. The Mishnah is assuming you have a text, an access to a text, or knowledge of a text, and it's there. But there's actually two ways that the Amoraim seem to possibly understand the role of the Mishnah in its relationship to that text. Either we could say the Mishnah is coming to explain the text directly, and the fact that there's such a pasuk and we're addressing the pasuk, we're forced to address in the order of the pasuk. Or, that's the first answer. The second answer is something totally different, which is the fact that there is a pasuk out there that says night doesn't force us at all to say night before day. We're not coming to explain psukim. The Mishnah is a standalone text all to itself. Yes, it presumes that you know that there's psukim are there, but not that you're following the psukim or explaining the psukim, just that you're aware that the Torah has a pasuk out there somewhere. And therefore, what would govern how the Mishnah is structured is what's normal. What's normal in terms of the Torah's conception. In your case, what comes first, day or night? The answer is night comes before day, as you see when the world is created. So there's two very radically different approaches. One is that we're coming to explain psukim directly, and one is no. What's governing this is just general Torah principles, and the general Torah principle is that night comes before day. Okay? Either way, I think you're forced to say the reason why I did this very weird double-barreled question is to tell that everyone's agreeing on that first premise. Everyone agrees that the Mishnah presumes you're aware of the Torah text. That those psukim are givens. No one's assuming otherwise. We're not having to re-explain, we're not having to justify or establish facts of psukim. The psukim establish the facts. We're not coming to define the parameters. When is b'shach b'cha, when is kumecha, etc. Good. Now,
so where does the Kohen, the true, where does that come into it?
that's a good question, but I want you to write it down. And when I say we're done with this piece, who has questions, I want you to look at your notes and ask me. Really, because the Mishnah itself will get there, but I will get there. That's the Gemara. But yeah, make it the Gemara. See, the Gemara will get there. But anyways, make a note. I don't mean to downplay the point of questions. Don't let any question go unanswered, but let the Gemara do its thing, let me do my thing, and we will come back. And we will get from Bezoshem. Okay. So that's the first give and take of the Gemara. Now the Gemara asks a question. Ihachi. Ihachi means if that's true. Now, your biggest enemy in learning Gemara are pronouns. Pronouns, as you probably remember from grammar school, are words that take the place of nouns. Some pronouns like he, she, it, are bad. Like what do you say? He said. Well, which he are you talking about? But sometimes the more common pronoun that was going to get us to mischief is what are called demonstrative pronouns, like if that is true. Well, what's the proposition that we refer to when we say that? That's very important to clarify. Because you should, in saying over the Gemara and speak it out to make sure you understand it, you should not use words like this and that or he, ever. That just allows you wiggle room. So we need to clarify. The Gemara says if that is true, but we'll have to make sure you understand what is that it's referring to. The Gemara says if that is true, we'll have to clarify. So then the Seifa means the latter part of the Mishnah. When it says, I'll come back and explain. The Ketani, when the latter part of the Mishnah says, B'shachar mevarach shtayim lefanel ba'achas la'achareh. In the morning time, make your brachas on the Kriya Shema. There's 2 brachas before the morning Kriya Shema, and 1 bracha afterwards. And then be'erev mevarach shtayim lefanel b'shtayim la'achareh. In the evening time Kriya Shema, there's 2 blessings before, 2 blessings afterwards. That's a quote from a Mishna later on. So then, what happened there? What happened there was first we talked about morning blessings, and then we talked about evening blessings. And if that is true, we'll come back to what that is, so that doesn't make sense. Listni, what it should have taught, is the Arvis Bereisha. It should have taught about the evening blessings first, and then the morning blessings. Again, look inside. I find it very useful in my Gemara. I've done it all the time. I put a box around any Tanaitic source, any Mishna, quote of a Mishna, Raisa, etc. I put a box around them. It helps with orientation. So that would be the case. The box here is from afterward Dikatani, B'shachar, which comes first. Morning, Mevarach Shtayim Lefaneh B'achas La'achareh, 2 and 1 blessings. Uve Erev, and in the evening, Kriya Shema, Mevarach Shtayim Lefaneh B'shtayim La'achareh, 2 before and 2 afterwards. End of the box, end of the Mishnah. So, just a bit of technical housekeeping for a moment. The Mishnayos have to be considered, should be considered, the Gemara does consider them, to have been in units of a whole parak. You will see, I told you there are 3 major versions of the Mishnah. There's the Mishnah we have on the Mishnah shelf, there's the Rabbi Mishnayos, and the Yerushalmi's Mishnayos. The most notable difference is that they're parsed, they're broken up in different ways, oftentimes. And the reason why is because it seems that originally, when the Mishnah was first written, they were written in a whole parak, like an unbroken whole parak. And later on, for ease of access, the Mishnah is broken into small pieces, and then Gemara is on phrase by phrase or section by section. But like Parak Aleph, Mishnah Aleph is a later development. So here when the Gemara says, wait a second, if you're going to tell me that's true, whatever that is, maybe you know already, hope you know already, so then later on, the Seifa, the latter part of the Mishnah, it means later on in this Parak. It looks like there's a single unit. And if it's a single unit, and you're telling me the rule is, and that of course must be, that the Torah is, well, let's figure it out for a second more, whatever that is, the Mishnah is changing rules. The first part of the chapter, it teaches night before day, and the later part of the chapter, it says day before night. So somebody's not adding up there. So what's it if that is true? Is it going on the first answer or the second answer?
I think it's going to both.
Okay, so some say second, some say both. So Toso speaks out, it must be going just on the second answer only. Why? This is important to bring out. So how could you say it's going on both? Because if the Mishnah is saying, well, the pasuk said night and day, so it's forcing us to say night and then day. So why would that not be relevant here? The answer is because these are brachos. Brachos are rabbinic enactments, let's say from Ashkenaz to Gedola, and not from the psukim. So the fact that if we're taking the first approach, it's called the maximalist approach, that the Mishnayos are coming to explicate psukim directly. There's an amazing Gra. The Gra in Avos, Pirkei Avos, says it's called Avos because every line there can be attributed to an exact pasuk. Pasuk by pasuk. I don't think there's a raya or not for here, but the point is that if we're explaining psukim, so that would explain why night comes before day, despite the fact that it may not be normal. That wouldn't force our hand when it comes to brachos, the Rabban issue, to talk about night before day. Right? There we can talk about day before night. With me? But if you're saying the rule is the Mishnah is going through how the Torah views time. Torah views time, night precedes the day. So then that would be true whether we're talking about the Raisa of the Kriya Shema or the Rabban of saying brachos. And so then what business does the Mishnah have in changing its orientation, start talking about morning before night? Doesn't seem to make sense. So we're going on that second answer. So the Gemara answers, fascinating answer. It says, Tana pasach ba'arvis. Listen, you have to differentiate, these are my words, you have to differentiate between strategy and tactics. The strategy of the Mishnah is to follow suit with what's the Torah's framework and might come before day. But the flow of the Mishnah went, we talked about the Kriya Shema of evening, the nighttime one, then we talked about the Kriya Shema of the morning, then we went on to talk about brachos. So if that's true, now we're on the topic of the morning. The last thing we talked about was the morning Kriya Shema. So the normal tactics of the Gemara to keep things sensible is we're talking about morning, we'll continue talking about morning. And therefore, Tana Pasach Ba'arvis, it started out talking about evening, because that's how the Torah looks at night before day. V'hadar then proceeded, Tani the B'Shachris, the third Mishna of what we call the third Mishna of the Perek, talks about Kriya Shema of the morning, and therefore, Ad the Koi B'Shachris, now that we're standing, the same word Koi as before, now that we're oriented, we're focused on the Shachris, the morning Kriya Shema, so Pirish Milah de Shachris, then we'll continue talking about that and mention also the blessings that precede and follow the morning Kriya Shema. V'hadar, then we'll go back and Pirish Milah de Arvis, go back and discuss the nighttime Kriya Shema. So in other words, we're saying straight, in the second answer, that the Torah's whole view is that night precedes day, and that's what's governing the order of this Mishnah. We're saying, if your question is, if that's true, Ihachi, so why did the latter part of the parak talk about blessings of the morning before the blessings of the evening? So the Gemara answers, well, we are being very practical and sensible, because we want this text to be sensible and coherent. And since we were on the topic of daytime Kriya Shema, we went to talk about daytime blessings on the Kriya Shema. And then, since we have a loose end, what about the blessings of the nighttime? We'll go back and talk about the nighttime one. Good. Yes, that was the time. That's the Gemara's piece on the structure and order of the Mishnah. Before now, we will talk about the content of the Mishnah. So, any questions on what we said? Yeah.
What was the box that you would recommend that we draw around the Mishnah statement? Where did that begin and end?
So this is okay. Oh, so yes, I want to say that. I'll say it again. I personally find it very, very useful to just mark out in the Gemara text where the source material comes from. The source material meaning the Mishnah and Berachos. Did we discuss what Berachos were? Berachos were other Tanaim, essentially collections that didn't make it into the Mishnah, but they kind of carry the same kind of weight, more or less, maybe a little less, but they carry weight. So I said you should just box them. So I said the box starts after the word Dikatani. You know what might be useful? I didn't do it. But maybe I recommend maybe numbering take a moment, not right now, before class tomorrow, to number the lines of the Amud, just like number every 5 or something. You know, 5th line, number 5, 10th line, number 10. I will also. That'll make it much easier for me to say, I look at line 7, otherwise it's difficult to refer to what I'm talking about. Anyways, but here, the first one line is Boker, it's like 2/3 of the way down. So it says Dikatani, as it said in a Mishnah. The word B'Shachar, that's where it starts. Then 2 lines down, La'achareh is the last word. The second last word in the line is where it ends. That's a quote from the Mishnah. So I'm saying box those in. It helps you orient it, sort of gives you, otherwise it's just a block of text. You know, so I find it very useful. This is
I just mentioned there's a site that has that, like Gemara markings, it's called.
Oh yeah, they did it?
Yeah, they did it. I have
Oh, it's great. So that's Yonasan Berger did. I'm sure it's his answer, right?
Yeah,
So he was a Rabbi one like 20 years ago, whatever it was, and then Dov Bauer was probably the guy behind it. Went to America and tried to promote this.
Oh, he's a big
marketing
bucket
system.
master.
Yeah. So I got it from him. That's where I got the system. Oh, so it's a website you can download.
Yeah, you can download it.
That's great. So he has a maybe over time I'll give you. There's like lots of markings, you know, to punctuate the Gemara to demark. Like if you look at my Gemara, you'll come see later on. You can see I got circles, squiggles, and diamonds, and triangles, and boxes. Up triangle, down triangles, and so on. Anyways, but one thing at a time. Just
Maybe
we're not boxes.
email us the source.
Yeah, I'll get it. I'll share it for sure. It's a pleasure. So, very good. So that's the Gemara's first discussion about the structure of our Mishnah, and we established one very important point, which is the Mishnah is based on the existence of Psukim, and we have what we'll call a maximalist and a minimalist approach, if you will, that is actually going to explain Psukim directly, hence we're forced by the Psukim to do in certain order, as you see over here, or no, just in general, there's an existence of Psukim, and we'll address things in the generic way the Torah looks at them, based on the Psukim. Good. So now, the Mishnah, the Gemara takes up issue with the content of the Mishnah. So it starts with the words Amar Mar. Now, Amar Mar, and I over the course, Bez Hashem, over the course of our learning together, I will point you out like the exact function. These words are like very technical. Anyone for example, if you know anything, if you know how to play bridge, for argument's sake, if you're familiar with that, that's comes to mind better at the moment. Like when you say things that you're speaking English, but they're actually a hint of you're doing it, telling you the move you're making next. You're giving a warning. This is the kind of move I'm making. So the Gemara is like that also. I don't know if that was. How many people got that reference? On some level? Yeah, on some level. Yeah. There's a code. Even though you're just saying something, but you could have said it a different way. So the Gemara works with that also. I'll illustrate as I go on. Not too much for now. But the point is, Amar Mar, which literally means the master said is like has a specific connotation, which is in the course of our long discussion, someone brought up a brisa, and that source has an issue I want to reference. So Amar Mar, the master who was brought into our discussion, I want to pick apart some quote from there. Here, Amar Mar is like a unique usage in Shas. I don't know, more or less unique usage in Shas. The Amar Mar is referring to our Mishnah. So this is a rule breaker. Normally Amar Mar is a function, which means that brisa you brought in, well, I want to discuss it for a second. But here, it's just referring to general Mishnah. Why it does that is beyond me. But anyways, worth pointing out. Amar Mar, the master, meaning our Mishnah in this case, our Mishnah had said, the Mishnah said the starting time for Kriya Shema is when the Kohanim come in to eat their truma. Now, michti. Michti means, let's think about that for a second. Wait a second. Yeah, it means something, michti, like let's see. Yeah, let's think about that for a second. Kohanim, emas ka'achli truma. When is that time the Kohanim eat their truma? Mishas Teitz Kochavim. I let the cat out of the bag yesterday, but here the Mishnah, the Gemara says explicitly, the Kohanim are allowed to eat their truma when the stars come out. So if that's true, so then why are you writing in riddles? If you want to establish the starting time of Kriya Shema, just say, listen, let it teach. Mishas Teitz Kochavim. That's reasonable. Question mark. So the Gemara answers, no, Milsa Agav Orche. It's coming to teach you like a 2-for-1. Literally a Milsa, a matter, Agav, on the back of Orche, along the way. Like I taught you, along the way of saying it this way, we were able to squeeze in another point. Kamash Malan, it's coming to teach us, Kohanim, Emas Ka'achli Betruma, when can the Kohanim eat their Truma? Mishas Teitzu Kochavim, when the stars come out. Now, obviously you take a step back and think about it, you wouldn't have been able to deduce that if you didn't have someone to tell you that this is a reference to 3 stars. So this doesn't unravel the knot of the Mishnah is a closed circuit that you can't break into without having a key. Nevertheless, as we will see in a moment, it's clear that we're talking about Kriya Shema Shel Erev, the nighttime one. So what we're telling you is that the Kohanim can also eat their truma in the evening. Kamash Malan, and that teaches us, therefore, that's no big chiddush at nighttime. But the big chiddush of the Mishnah, therefore, is the kapara lo ma'akva, that atonement isn't ma'akev, isn't an impediment to them eating their truma. Let me explain this outside, because this is too many words, too few words and too many ideas circulating all of a second. I mentioned it yesterday, and I actually mentioned it more this morning in the Mishnah Shir, that there are different stages in the Tahara process. If a Kohen became a Zav, so he's going to have 3 events to become Tahar. He needs to go to the mikvah sometime during the day of end of his process. Then he needs to have 3 stars come out on him. The day has to pass on him. We'll see exactly the words of the pasuk in a second. Via Shemesh V'Tayr, so the day has to pass, and then he could come in 3 stars and eat his star. Even though he's not yet totally tahor, he will only become tahor the next day after he brings the karbanos he's obliged to bring. Until he brings those karbanos, he's called the Mechusar Kippurim, he lacks atonement, and he's still tameh. Tameh meaning that he is, it's called the Shlishi L'Tumah. Those who were here this morning, that means, if you remember what I said moments ago, if you know from elsewhere, as a person who goes to the mikvah, he's called the Tavul Yom. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm not going into more now, but I'll just, if this is familiar, I'll do a quick review. When he goes to the mikvah, he becomes a Tavul Yom. He went to the day of his mikvah going, he's like considered like a Sheni L'Tumah, which means he doesn't ruin Chulin, but he does ruin Truma. I apologize if you're lost on this, but those who aren't, they still be useful. So he can, as a Sheni, he can't yet touch Truma, because he'll make it Tameh, which is an Isser. But once he has Erev Shemesh, once he has 3 stars coming out, also on him, the day is passed, he now goes from being a Teful Yom, a 2nd degree Tumah guy, to being a Shlish L'Tumah, a 3rd degree Tameh guy, meaning what's called a Mechusar Kippurim. He lacks atonement. But as a Shlishi, as a 3rd degree Tameh guy, he doesn't ruin Truma. Truma is only susceptible down to 3 degrees, so he can now eat his Truma without a problem. But he still can't touch Kachim because he's a Shlishi. Tomorrow morning he'll bring his carbon as a Zav, if he's a Zav, and then he'll effect atonement, and then he goes from being a Shlishi to being totally Tower, and able once again to deal with
And
Kachim.
he can still go into the Beit HaMikdash if he's Tameh, but that
He
second
actually,
level?
he's restricted. No, he's restricted where he can and can't do, where he can go. and
Where
can't
he can go.
Yeah, he's restricted. So he's standing essentially outside delivering his birds to be brought from, and then he'll be able to go. In any case, so that's what the I could let it get ahead of things because it's, to be clear, the Chiddush, again, of the Mishnah is, you might have thought that a Kohen cannot eat Truma until he brings his Karbanos, because he's Mechusar Kippur, he likes atonement, so the Mishnah is going to teach you, no, Truma he's okay from nightfall, even though Kachim is not okay until he brings his Karbanos. And that's what the words mean here, that the Kapar Lama Akva, that atonement isn't inhibiting him from eating Truma, just he'll have to deal with his atonement later on. The Gemara, of course, does this kind of stuff a lot, but if you feel a little lost for a moment here, so I apologize, I'm letting it slide because the Gemara itself had said, this is just a side point. The Milsa Agav Orcha, just telling you like an unrelated point. I don't want to give a whole shir into Mutahara and Truma, just off our point. But anyways, hopefully it was clear enough. So here you see that the Kavar Lo Ma'akva, it says Kinsanya, it says in a brisa. So if you look, I'll point out to you, Ki is the prefix like, the Dalet in Aramaic is like the Shin in modern Hebrew, like that, and Tanya is a hint that we're talking about a brisa as opposed to a Mishnah. So if you look the moment above, if you look almost directly above this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 lines, almost straight up, before the box, I told you about the box, it says De Kitani. Kitani is telling you it's a Mishnah. The Tanya is telling you it's a brisa. So that's what I meant by these little words are encoded to give you a hint of what we're doing. So here, Kitanya, like it says in a brisa. The pasuk says, "Uva Hashemesh b'taher." The sun, I'll just translate. The sun will set. Literally, the sun will come. The sun will set b'taher, and the sky will be purified of its light, and then the Kohen can eat his truma. That's the pasuk says that. So therefore, you see that it's sunset plus the waning of all the light. At that point, he can eat his truma. Bia shimsho makvaso, the setting of the sun, like the leaving of its light, is an impediment to him eating his truma, the ein kaparaso, but his lack of atonement is not makvaso melechol truma. It's not an impediment to eating his truma. So that's a brisa which supports what our Mishnah teaching. Remember now, the fact that the Mishnah and the brisa are sort of redundant, as you'd say, why should the Mishnah teach this? They have a brisa that teaches the same thing, that Kapara is non-ma'akiv. The answer is, well, this brisa's, the word brisa is like from the word bar, outside. In fact, Rabbi just said this on Shabbos. If you heard him speak, he said, bar mitzvah. Yeah, sorry. Anyways, but the word bar means outside, and the barisos were Tanaic sources that were left outside the canon, the official Mishnah text. So the fact that they're redundant is a given, because there are many brises lurking. Only some subset of them became official Mishnayos. So here we're bringing a proof that the implication of the Mishnah is to teach you that the Kohen doesn't need to bring his karbanos before he eats truma, and we have a brisa that supports it. Classic Gemara structure. Now, we're going to now, as the Gemara is willing to do, get sidetracked for a moment to talk about that point there, that proof from the brisa. Because the Gemara says, "Umemai," and how do you know the high uva hashemesh, that when the pasuk says and the sun comes, that it's bias hashemesh, that it's the setting of the sun. V'hai v'taher, and this purification, meaning that is purification is tahar yoma, is a purification of the light, of the day. I mean, the day is really gone and waned away, and there's no more light polluting the sky, and now we're in darkness. Like, who says that's what the psukim mean? Maybe the psukim mean, turning on the page on the top on the base, Dilma means maybe, alternatively, maybe it's bias oro, it's the, ba in Hebrew means to come. So maybe it doesn't mean the sun coming to rest over the horizon at Shkia time. Maybe it means the sun coming up in the morning at Nate's time. Dilma bias oro, it's the arrival of the sun's light. That's the uva shemesh. And the who, that's what it is. Umay v'taher, when the pasuk says and become purified, it doesn't mean the sky became purified of the light of the sun, but rather Tahir Gavra. It means he will go and purify himself. Meaning what? Maybe when it says Uva Hashemesh v'taher, it means the next day will come, the sun will rise, and he'll go effect his purification by bringing karbanos. And then he can eat his truma. So So that would imply that the bringing of the karbanos, getting kapara, is actually taka malakim. It is actually something that impedes him from eating his truma, and maybe he can't eat truma until the next morning. In other words, the question is, how can you bring a proof from these psukim that it's dafka a nighttime activity that allows him, nighttime events that allow him to go and eat his truma? Maybe they're daytime events, because uvah hashemish is not. The sun comes, who says that's setting? Maybe it's rising. And the taher, maybe who says it's the sky being purified of light? Maybe it's him going to the mikvah or whatever it is the next day and or bring karbanos and becoming tahor. So that's the question. So Amar Rabba Bar Rav Shila, this is an Amora, the Amora will answer. He says, Im kain, if it were true, for the record, if you have I have in mind an aleph and a chaf. Aleph chaf is im kain, if that were true. Ein and a chaf, which I don't have, which you don't have either, which is confusing, is al kain, which means therefore. Not the same. Okay, so im kain, if that were true, that the Sukkim could support the explanation that the taher means he will go and purify himself. So then, le makra, the verse should have said v'yitaher, the imperative, and he must go purify himself by bringing the karbanos. The pasuk should have said v'hashemesh, the next day will arrive, v'yitaher, let him go purify himself by bringing his karbanos, etc., and then he can eat his truma. But it doesn't say that. My v'taher, it just says the sun will come, v'taher, and purity will happen. Purity happens. So, tar yoma must mean that the day is being purified of the light that's, blocking the lights of the sky, if you will. Yeah, should I restate that, or is it clear? That point clear? Yeah? K'da amri inchi, and now there's like a, parenthetical final comment that Rabbi Bar Shila says, which is, you know what? If you're troubled by this strange idiom, which is also challenging me right now to translate to English, of taher meaning the night sky being purified of the light, there's actually such an expression. This won't ring much to us because we don't speak ancient Babylonian Aramaic. But in those days, people would have this expression. People say, Irav Shimsha, the sun has, Erev has set. Idki Yoma, and the day has been, washed away. Something like that. There's an expression, we don't have that expression now analog in English, but he was just saying to Idki means the same as the taher, purified. The day has been washed away. Washed away, it's not a bad analog in English. So you can say the day is washed away. So we say the same way that they have in their Aramaic Lashon, they talk about the day being washed away, and doesn't strike you as strange. So when the pasuk says that the day becomes tahor, it means the light's been washed out of the sky, so to speak. That shouldn't strike you as being too strange. You understand what he's doing there? He's saying it's not as, my explanation is not as strange as it sounds, if you think it is strange. Fine. Before I go on, let me just say something that is, a rule which I'm going to not keep to in our learning, but in general, a rule is you can never trust. You shouldn't just trust the Gemara or the Mefarshim. You got to look things up. You got to make sure that the full quote is there. Look at the full quote of this pasuk of the V'Hashemesh V'Taher. It actually says, and then the kohen can eat his kachim, not his truma. So I'm just putting you on notice that the understanding of the pasuk is the kachim is referring to as taka truma and not kachim, which is very strange. I know, but anyways, I'm letting you know that because if you're a very studious, diligent, assiduous student, you'll go back and look at the pasukim, and you'll say, wait a second, the rabbi said it was about truma and it says explicitly kachim. Okay, so I don't want to go to that topic now. But anyways, that psukim are understood to be referring to the kachim and the pasuk are referring to truma, which is not so weird. Elsewhere in psukim we refer to truma as kachim.
Well, the English pasuk kilachmohu, which is
right, exactly,
more appropriate for truma than for a korban.
That's right. Oh yeah, that's the point. Someone asked me yesterday about the Gemara, so I'm using. When I was a kid, when I got this Gemara, the Gemara since the last legs already. So this was Rubinstein was the. I don't know. Rubinstein and Talmud were the best Gemaras out there at the time. Now they're, blurry, horrible books, and everyone has the Vilna or the Oz V'Hadar, which are also kind of psukim on the side. So you probably have the pasuk right on the side of your Gemara there. You can see it for yourself. Kilachmahu means because it's his food. Yeah, exactly right. Good. Anyways, back to this. So just keeping the Shach V'Tar, the story straight here. We said the Mishna had talked about the time for saying Kriya Shema is when the Kohanim eat their Truma. We said that's why you're talking in circles. We answered, well, we want to teach you two things, not just that you could say Kriya Shema from Tseis, from Zarks, but also the Kohanim would eat their Truma from Tseis even though they haven't got Kapara. And if you want to ask a question, as the Gemara says, if that's true, why does the Pasuk say... And we brought a proof, which was, the Pasuk says, the sun will set, the day will pass, wash away, and then he can eat his Truma. And if you'll ask, says the Gemara now, or they try to ask, who says that if the sun setting, Uva Shemesh means the sun sets, and the day washes away, maybe it's, so to speak, the sun rises and he's going to go wash his soul clean by bringing this karbanos. So he answered, the answer was, well, it says, v'taher, in a simple present tense, the day washes away, as opposed to an imperative, and he must go and effect, tahara for himself. Now, the Gemara continues on here. In the beginning of Berachos, for reasons I don't really know, there's like periods where we close things all over the place. That was probably someone in, who knows what, 1600s, or whatever it was, that did that. This habit falls away as you get further in Shas. There aren't little dots falling over the place. But all I want to tell you is those dots, which you have here, are some printer's shtick. I don't know who and when, to be honest. But they're irrelevant. You can ignore them. And they don't. Here, it's certainly inappropriate to put a period because we're at the exact same topic. Rabbi Bar Shila had answered, the question was on the Brisa, who says V'Hashemesh means the sun setting and the sun rising. He gave a proof from V'Yitaher. But Ma'arava, in the west, where's the west? There it's Israel. Yeah, because they're in Babel, right? So Babel is to the northeast of here, so the southwest, they call the west. Is there it's Israel. So the main scholars of the Bavli and I guess of Klal Yisrael in this time were in Babel, but there was still a minority back in Eretz Yisrael who need to be reckoned with. You'll see these people like Rav Dimi and so on, people bring Rabbi Yochanan statements. You see, there was a shuttle of information slowly. It wasn't internet speed, but there was a shuttle of information back and forth. And B'Marava, without telephones, the West didn't have this proof of the V'Taher as opposed to V'Yitaher. B'Marava had Rab Bar Shila lo shmielhu. They hadn't heard this brilliance proof from the text and say V'Yitaher. Uva'olami boy, and the same question was raised up. Boy means like to need or want. Like they had the same inquiry. How do you know V'Hashemesh means the sun setting, it's the sun rising? Hi, V'Hashemesh b'ya shimshahu, who says it's the sun setting, and Umay b'taher, and who says washed away is tar yoma, the day washing away. Is that true? Well, Dilma, maybe no. Maybe it's bias oro, it's the arrival the next morning of the sun when it rises. Umay b'taher, when it says impurify, tar gavri, he should become tahor. In other words, they had the exact same question, but they didn't have his proof from tar versus b'yitaher, imperative versus simple present. V'hadar Pashti, I thought I would ignore Girsa issues, but I will build in Bachs if I'm getting to you, they're probably right. In any case, they themselves went and explained this, they answered this question, La Mibraisa. They weren't clever enough, I guess, that's okay to say, I don't mean that in any other way, to come up with that. They didn't have Rab Bar Shila to figure out the proof from Pasuk, but they had a Brisa, they had a black and white text that show that it's true. Midikatani b'Brisa, because the Brisa says, and it's quoted just the end of it, when do the Kohanim get to eat their truma? When similar davar, the sign you can know at the time to eat truma is Tesu Kochavim, when the stars come out. And if the Brisa says the time for Kohanim to eat their truma, the sign when they're ready to eat their truma is when the stars come out, so that obviously tells you it's nighttime and not daytime, and therefore you can see it's about not offering karbanos, because, this is an important point, karbanos are only brought in the daytime. You only can bring the karbanos between the two meet in the middle of the day. So since they're eating at night, obviously bring the karbanos namak and then eating truma. So two approaches to prove, one from a deduction from a pasuk and one from an external source of Raisa, that kapara, atonements, bring karbanos is namak, kohen for eating their truma. Fine. Period. And I guess, I'm sorry, the period's not there. The period is, it says, Shema Mina, you hear from there, that Bia Shimshahu, you can see from the fact that there's a price like this, that V'Hashemesh, the sun, is setting, Umay V'Tar, Tar Yoma, it's the day washing away, and not the other. Period. Okay, yes, now's a good time for questions. And now, if you had a question about the Kohanim, now I'll answer. And now it's clear.
The Kohanim, if they are Tamei, and they have to make themselves tahar, they have to be karbonos. Yes?
So good, that's a good question. So the truth is
And what kabbonos would they bring?
Okay, good, okay, fine. So it is a bit off our top, but I'll answer very briefly. It's a fair question. So most types of tuma, if a person comes tamei from them, are not mechayev. They're not obligated korban to brought. There are actually 4 types of tuma that are mechayev korban to brought: zav, zava, yoledes, and metzora. A zav, which has this weird emission, and he has to have it 3 times mechayev korban. If he has it 1 time, he just has to wait a day and become tahor. If mikvah, if he's twice, then he needs to wait 7 days, but no korban. If he's 3 times in 1, 2, or 3 days, he has to bring korbanos after 7 days of becoming tahor. So this is our code here. He had 3 re'iyas. He saw this weird emission out of him, not seminal emission, some sort of weird dripping out of him. And he 3 times. So he says, "Oh, now I'm a serious zav. I gotta wait 7 days and make sure I'm not dripping anything anymore." After 7 clean days, he then goes to the mikvah. He becomes a teful yom. He waits till Erev Shemesh, nightfall. Now he can go to eat truma once again. And then the next morning, he can go to the base of mikdash and bring his korbanos. But he may have to wait a week or a month or a year until he gets back to Yerushalayim, for argument's sake, bring his korbanos. He eats truma all that time. There's a Kohen who lives, in Timbuktu. That's a bad example. He lives in in Sfat, yeah? So he's not coming to the base of mikdash tomorrow because it's far away. It's a bad example because truma is only in Eretz Yisrael. That's why it's a bad example. But if he's living in Sfat, so he'll go to the mikveh, have Erev Shemesh, and then he'll bring his korban when he can, when he next comes to Yerushalayim, whenever that's going to be. It may not be tomorrow, it may not be for weeks or months even. That's only for a zav. A Kohen can't really be a zava because that's for girls, and we're talking about Kohen for boys. But it is relevant. But I don't get it. The wife can also eat truma. I don't know, too many details. Metzora is this tzaras business, more complicated, and not too much for now. And yoledes is having a baby. The truth is, it is relevant to women because wives of Kohanim can eat truma too. I'll get into that now, but the same rules would apply. And then to answer your very question, zav, which is my example, because that's only a reasonable example that we're talking about for a man Kohen, he brings 2 birds, an ola self and a chat self. He brings them, thanks more than that means anything, so he doesn't have korbanos he brings. Good. Any other questions?
Can I ask another question on that?
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
The Gemara says...
I'm not going on, by the way, I'm not going to go on, it's good timing, but
the Gemara says Kohen, doesn't say Kohanim. Now, when you can eat the...
the Mishna does say, Mishna Kohanim Technology.
It says Kohanim? Or it says Kohanim? It says
First line.
it says Kohanim.
Yeah, plural.
So it's when a group of Kohanim go to eat.
Any Kohen, the Kohanim who were
Yeah.
Tamei now can eat. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, the Bible, even without Rabbi Sheva, that Brisa would have proved that that's what the pasuk means, right? I mean, was the Indian that they just wanted to show it's in the pasuk itself you can deduce it?
That's an interesting question. So I guess it's an interesting question. So the question is, presumably the people in Bavel also had the Brisa, what do they come onto the pasuk for? So there's 2 possible answers, at least, that pop to mind. Number one is, and they're both useful to know, even if either or both are true, but both, what I'm going to say, is true and important to know. Number one, not all the Amoraim, I should say it again, the Amoraim did not know all of the Brises, period. Okay, that's an important point to know. The Amoraim knew all the Mishnayos, that's a given, because that's the formal text, and everyone certainly should know it. They spent the shlish of their time learning Mishnah, they got it. But the Brises are innumerable, potentially, because like every Tana might have had his own tradition, and there could be thousands of versions, amongst the people of slightly variant prices. Because remember, I should speak this out, very important. Psukim are very important, and they don't change, right? Obviously, the pasuk has to be maintained integrity to every last tag, every last dot. But the Torah Shabbal Peh, the words actually don't matter. That's an important point to say. Like, they don't matter. We don't really care what Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, the words he said. And did he say, I don't know, whatever, did he say Kohen or Kohanim? That's not important, it's Bechlal. I mean, maybe the fact that Rabbi, the Rambam emphasizes what a linguistic genius Rabbi Nasi was, and that the Mishna is written with tremendous precision. So we can take it to task in terms of its nuances, and we're justified in doing that. But the Rambam, you can do that also too, but the Rambam certainly isn't suggesting he's saying what Moshe Rabbeinu heard, whatever it is, he's rewriting his own words. So the author of the Mishna is also rewriting his own words, potentially. And we don't care about the exact words, we care about the ideas. The Torah Shabbat is purely conceptual, They're ideas, and the words don't matter. Am I clear? The particular words don't matter.
As long as the idea comes across clearly.
And that's why the proper thing to do, like, you know, I'm sure, so to speak, just to illustrate the points, if the Mishnah is to be written today, so to speak, they wouldn't be talking about oxes scoring things, because none of us know about oxes today. They think about dogs biting to pet dogs, or whatever the story is. You follow? No one cares. They're speaking in the language they spoke it. That's important. So the Mishnah is a finite, definitive text, but the words themselves aren't essential. But the Berachos are countless in their number, and the Amoraim who matched the Mishnah didn't necessarily know the Berachos. So it could be, one possible answer is Taka, they just didn't have that Berachos and they didn't know. That's a simple answer. It may not be true, because you could say, I'll give you a different answer, which is probably a better answer. I just wanted to bring it up, that they don't know the Berachos. That obviously bringing proof from a pasuk is much more weighty than bringing proof from a brisa. Because a brisa is just a brisa, right? It's just all we're saying is the question was like we're asking how do you know what the pasuk means? So it's much more to say well the pasuk obviously means that because the words themselves can't be sova, they can't tolerate this other interpretation, and it's internally consistent, than to have to rely on a brisa that gives you a hint that it's nighttime. You follow? So really. So I'll give you two answers. Either in Bavel they didn't have the brisa, or a better answer probably is even if they had the brisa, they'd much rather have a proof that the pasuk itself must mean this as opposed to relying on a brisa externally.
Okay.
I had problems understanding why the Mishnah starts off with this issue of when you lie down and wait. Why not v'shivtecha b'veitecha u'lechtecha b'derech? It's the same issue. You're using the bait.
Okay, that's an interesting question. So I'm always hesitant. The question is why we're starting with this pasuk is the first pasuk in the Chumash. There's a pasuk in the middle of our Kriyashma. Why we're starting with this pasuk?
Yeah.
Good. So I'm always. Some questions are much more. I don't have a word for it, but much more demanding than others. That question is not such a demanding question. I don't mean to insult your question. I'm just saying.
No.
Here you can ask. When a question, the same question could be asked no matter what it said, it's a much weaker question than if it couldn't. In other words, if the Mishnah would have said, what does it mean when it says, U'lechtecha b'derech, you could say, well, why is the Mishnah talking about, I don't know, the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh? That's earlier. And whatever the Mishnah would have said, you could have had a kasha. Why are we starting here? Why start somewhere else? That's always a reasonable question. So that question doesn't demand an answer. In other words, at some points, it had to say something. So the answer could be, I don't know if it is the answer, but the answer could be, had to start somewhere, and this is where it started. You follow what I'm saying? It's always true.
I understand, but it doesn't answer the question.
I'll answer your question, but I'm saying my answer is sort of speculative, and it's based on, it's not my answer, but the answer I'll give is from other people that have speculated before, but I'm just speaking out your question, it's not a kasha. There's nothing difficult with the text. You're asking why here, and we'll maybe have a lesson to learn from it, but there's nothing, it had to start somewhere. I mean, that's all I'm saying. You could say, why start Kriya Shema? There's always a why here. Why there? So the answer is going to be, I'll give you one answer, which is that I think the most pashut answer, there are a few answers I can give you, is that we're starting with Kriya Shema because Kriya Shema is the declaration of our faith in Hashem, that there is Hashem's oneness, and that's an obvious, where else are you going to start? You're going to start, like the Rambam, for example, who's very Musadar, starts Yisodos, like the first foundation is there's a God. And so Kriya Shema is our articulation that there's a God. That's the right place to start. Whereas there's also a separate issue, which is going to dovetail to your answer, which is, like they say this to bar mitzvah boys. The first mitzvah you ever do when you're a bar mitzvah is Kriya Shema. Like as soon as the clock strikes 13, ding, you become a bar mitzvah. That's the same moment that the stars have come out, the same moment that the mitzvah Kriya Shema is upon you. And that's how the Jew starts his day, so to speak. It's the first mitzvah in terms of the flow of things that you'll do, and it's also the most essential mitzvah, arguably, in terms of, it's declaration of Hashem Echad. So that being the case, the reasonable place to start is with Kriya Shema. I didn't say it in the Dhamma, but I could have said it. The Gemara in Shabbos, the B'lavan Aleph, says that there's a pasuk in Yechezkel that says, "Emunas Tetecha Chos Yeshuos Chachmas V'das V'Yiras Hashem Hi Otzro." I hope that's exactly the pasuk. It darshans those first 6 words. Emunah Tetecha Chos Yeshuos. Each is a different seder, and understands Emunah. The first of those is a reference to Zeraim. Zeraim is here to discuss issues of Emunah, and therefore Berachos is discussing Emunah also. So therefore, the opening move in the Gemara is, let's talk about confirmation that there's a Hashem. And the first thing we'll do is the first moment that begins, which is the Kriyash Mashal Erev, the first time it happens at bedtime. They're assuming that you go to bed right away at the beginning of your day, beginning of your Seisuk Chavim day, and therefore temporally the first place to start, so to speak, is the first mitzvah you do, which is say Kriyash Ma at bedtime before you go to sleep and start your new day tomorrow. So I guess that's why I started here.
But it just doesn't answer my question. When you sit down in your house, do you say the Shema? When you walk on the road?
Okay, I'm sorry. So, and I should speak out that maybe for tomorrow because our time is up. But that is understood to be referring. That part of the pasuk is understood to be referring to learning Torah, not saying Kriyash Ma. Not for this second. We'll get to this later on. The left Chabadera means a mitzvah of speaking the words of Torah on the way in your home, not saying the mitzvah of Kriyash Ma. The Gemara will get to this.
But